Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, so a disclaimer before we go forward. I am not a surgeon nor a doctor. Okay, all of my talks are going to be very biased. They are all, of course, there are some facts. They're also my opinion from my experience over last almost 10 years, 20 years, and they are also very subjective. The things I'm going to show is most of them is public data. And my talk is also in line with Jajal Medical's core value, which is honesty and transparency, people as assets, and deep technical insights. Okay, just a short background of myself. I have had an opportunity to kind of circle around the world and come back from Gujarat, now back to Gujarat. Had a chance to, almost 20 years ago, my thesis was on patient-specific knee implant design with my professor, Dr. Ola Harrison. Then I've had an opportunity to work with two amazing companies, Materialize and Stryker, and globally worked with different medical device field and had an opportunity to have some impact there before just last year when I started our own venture called Jajal Medical in Vadodara, Gujarat. Okay, so customization, every patient's bone is different. Okay, and from head to toe, whether you take a skull, whether you take a toe, all anatomy is different. Just like our face, just like our fingerprints, everything is different. But I have a bad news actually. Okay, and that is that it doesn't mean that we are going to create custom implants for every patient and that is unique for that patient. Okay, it's just not happening. And I think Ayushi really gave that oversight on how virtual patients are coming in. So that's where if you look at other industry, right, how many times have you made your own custom shoes, right? You generally go buy, your size, you go and buy it. In the same way, it's the clothing. And medical device industry and orthopedics is no different. Okay, it's no different. It's only getting better with more information as we get the anatomy of different patients and around it. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but like what Ayushi mentioned, virtual patient computational modeling is what the world is moving towards. Okay, so custom implants, it's only for specifics where few complex cases where the anatomy doesn't fit. But in general, if you look at it, it's mostly they do a proper statistical shape modeling. They create a computational model over multiple different anatomies across the world, and then create this database from which they design an implant, and it fits really, really well. There's Materialize has it, Stryker has their own thing, they call it Soma. So globally most medical device companies have this and are going towards it. The thing is, these kind of infrastructure within a medical device company is very expensive. Like, just think about it, getting thousands and thousands of scans from across the globe, right? It's not going to be free, right? So these kind of infrastructures are expensive, but in the long run it pays off, because the example that Ayushi gave on the DJO, right? How better understanding of an anatomy can give you great outcome in terms of final implant design, which is what you're looking for. And a happier patient in the end means a happier surgeon, and a happier surgeon in the end also means a happier medical device company. But okay, however, what is important is the customization in the surgery is definitely happening more often than we think. What that means is, use of surgical guides, use of preoperative 3D planning. These are very important, because once the surgeon understands what exactly is happening to that patient, that helps them better plan the surgery. But before we go into that, I actually want to take a break and talk a little bit about, understanding this orthopedic surgeons. I know, there are surgeons in this group as well, so pardon me. But then, hopefully it gives the industry an example of, how they should be working with a surgeon. So, if you look at orthopedic surgeons, there are really two types. Okay, one is a trauma surgeon and the other one is a joint replacement surgeon. The trauma surgeons typically they work on accident cases regularly. They also work on malunions. What malunions means is that an accident happened, the fixing was not done properly, and now the patient has a defect that he or she is living for life. Okay, so they are actually fixing somebody else's mistake. But it's more complex than even an accident. Extraarticular deformities, congenital deformities, There are also, severe fractures in, say, pelvis region or hand region. So those are all kind of come under the bucket of this trauma surgeon in orthopedics. And then you have these joint replacement surgeon who focuses on different types of arthroplasties, right? So knee total knee replacement, hip replacement, or shoulder replacement, ankle replacement. Those are the areas they focus on. However, when you talk to a surgeon, it's important that they also have their own opinions. These are two different types of surgeons, so don't mix it. And if you want to have a chat, this is a good discussion you can have, and you can talk about the other guy, and you'll see an interesting insight from it. But in general, experience has been that they both are amazing surgeons. The trauma surgeons are a lot more innovative in a way, because they have to innovate inside the surgery with what they have. So you'll see that their innovation quotient is a lot higher, while a joint replacement surgeons have to really fine tune quite a bit. 1 degree here and there, 2 degree here and there can make or break their final outcomes of the patient. So they are also always generally focused on precision and accuracy, which is very important for them. So this kind of gives an overview of the orthopedics, and how these surgeons are, and in what it does. Okay, so now I'm gonna just chat a little bit about surgeon interaction, right? And I put a small picture here. What you see on the left hand side is the surgeon, and what you see on the right hand side is an engineer like me. And this is over my 10-15 years of experience. This is what we have learned, right? So these are the type of languages that an orthopedic surgeon would speak, right? That okay, we will do a lateral decubitus approach. We'll put a magic screw and a 13-hole plate on an anterior brim, and then I'm going to put it a little bit superior from the PBC. These are the kind of statements. And then an engineer would say, yes sir, give me an STL file so I can print it and give it to you, right? So they don't really match. And that's where also you will find that these surgeons are very perfectionist. They don't like mistakes, and if you make one mistake and you're out forever, actually, right? And as an engineers, we have always learned to modify, improve from our mistakes, right? And it's a little bit of a awkward situation that why it's so much focus on being perfect. And I think this is important fact that we as a patient, right? If you look from the patient's perspective, we as patients never expect any mistake from our surgeons, right? Because once we then go inside the OT, we expect the best, right? In the same way, because of that, the surgeons also expect that my team or somebody who's working with me also needs to be perfect, right? And that's where the perfection and the approach comes in, which is I think very important. Unlike other industry, right? This is serious stuff, guys. You can't make mistakes, because it's going to you can actually impact some patient's life forever. So you have to be careful, right? And however, we engineers always are like, okay, I learn from my mistakes. So anyway, so that's where the platforms like my segmenter or Materialize also has a heart print, or there's a 3D system has a virtual VSP technology, or the virtual surgical planning. Those platforms allow to kind of bridge this gap between a surgeon and a 3D printing community. What it does is it brings the clinical expertise that allows the surgeons to talk to a biomedical engineer who can figure out and generate an STL file, and then STL file gets can get printed at the 3D printing site. And then once the models are created, the surgical models or the guides are delivered in the right way to the surgeon. So these platforms we see as a future where it kind of bridges the gap between the surgeon and the 3D printing, and actually really leverage the 3D printing as a standard of care for complex surgeries. Okay, so here's an example of why such platforms solutions help, right? So a surgeon can upload a scan, can talk to the patient, can show the 3D model. It's easier for the data transfer to happen. The surgeon can do the preoperative planning online or offline with the biomedical engineering team, right? And then there's also a payment gateway. So if patient needs to make the payment, the patient can make the payment. And the same way, the same platform can be used by 3D printing guys to be the kind of in the center of it, saying, okay, I'll download the file, I'll print it, and I'll ship it to you. So it kind of merges and brings everybody together under one roof. Okay, before that, before we go to the next, I'm going to have a small poll time here and have Aditya kind of run a small poll to see we have put together a question.
So should I launch the poll?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So the question which we have for the audience is, what material should you be using when 3D printing a surgical guide or a part that is used inside the surgery? Is it food grade material, certified biocompatible material, or any type of material? So I'll just leave this on for a few seconds so everyone can vote in. Yep. So we've got our responses. So I'm putting it out, Ketan. So if you can just throw some light on how the responses come in.
Yeah.
So we have 91% who say that certified biocompatible materials should be used. So this is good news. So Ketan, I'll let you add some points here.
Yeah. Okay. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Yeah, so that's great. I think, and my next section of my talk is around biocompatible materials. So it really reconfirms, what we wanted to do. So let me just go over and now switch gears and talk a little bit about biocompatibility and why that is so important. So, before we go into the materials and the biocompatibility, overall, if you look at 3D printing technology, this is again singing to the choir. You guys all are expert in this. There are FDM, SLS, SLA, or DLP, or metal printing. When do you use what, right? So, for example, FDM is a great low cost, available everywhere kind of for basic visualization, right? If it's a complex surgery, you want the surgeon to take a look at it in his office and understand the anatomy. It's a great tool. It's also a great tool for patient awareness, when the surgeon wants to explain it, right? However, when you jump into a surgery, right, you have to be careful. Okay, SLS is which is what is used in those situations. SLA is used. The advantage with SLA or DLP technology, it's much faster. So for example, if you have a trauma surgery that is happening in next, say, 5 hours, right? If you have a local, let's say 3D Systems Figure 4 machine or any other DLP machine, you can print it in few hours and deliver it. Or if, for example, if a hospital has that, then you can deliver it very fast. The advantage with some of the SLA is also that you can do cutting and drilling a little bit more before. So, if you have a case where you want to do a little bit of practice beforehand, surgeon wants to do a little bit of practice beforehand, and then also use the same models in the surgery, then your SLA DLP is a better option. And then, of course, metal is all custom implants. So I'm not going to touch much on that area. Again, like I said, FDM, just be careful if you are taking these parts in the surgery, make sure that the material is USP class 6 material, certified material, which is a biomedical compatible material. I'm going to touch upon that a little bit, and so, material quality standards, if you look at it, it's 10993. I'm not going to bore with all these jargons, but in layman's term, food grade is not biocompatible material. Okay, they are two different things. Food grade means if you put a food in it, it is not going to leach into the food and your food will safe, right? However, a biocompatible is it's not going to react with the body, right? And it is not going to harm anything during the surgery. And that's where the USP class 6 certification comes in, where they actually do an animal testing, right? They do an irritation checking. They actually inject this in an animal. They implant it for a week and do all this and certify that this is biocompatible. And also, you have to make sure that the sterilization compatibility is there, whether it's an ETO or a steam, what can it do, so that if you end up doing a steam on an FDM, which is, say, USP class 6, you still run into trouble because now the final part is actually warped, right? And when you have a warped part, you take that inside the surgery, and then the fitting is an issue when you're using, say, surgical guide or something. So just those are some red flags that are important, and be mindful of. So in simple terms, just ask this question, is this material USP class 6? That's it. If you are taking it inside the operation theater, stop and ask this question, is this USP class 6? The answer is yes, you can go ahead, right? If the answer is no, then don't do it. Okay. And why am I stressing on this, don't do it, right? I want to give an example of other industry, and this might be a little bit of a harsh way of putting it, but I thought that it would be important for everyone to really understand the implications, because this is serious stuff. We are in medical device industry, right? So why is this important, right? you know uh, India is not a regulated market just yet. It is coming. It's about 2 years from now, in 2022, India is going to be at par with global standards of medical devices. So it's only a matter of few years now. So here is an example of a regulated market. Well, this guy Charlie Chi, well, he actually went to a prison for selling an unapproved surgical device. It was an instrument for knee surgery. Okay, and it got rejected, and then they had put it in it. So again, long story short, you have to be careful. These, when you have a medical device industry, it's a regulated market. When you have a regulated market, you need to be making sure that it doesn't impact the patient's life, because at the end of the day, these regulations are for making sure that the safety and efficacy of the patient is taken care as number one priority for everything we do. Okay. Okay, and then the good news is India is also in line, and there's a new medical device regulation that has come up, and they already have these 6 certifying bodies. So basically, if you have a certificate from one of these, you are actually ready for a global. So that is a I see it as a very positive thing, because once we are at par in terms of regulations and quality standards, it will also put companies from India in a global map. So we should look at that as a opportunity for us to kind of go global as well. Okay, so now I'm gonna kind of switch gears and talk about examples and applications where 3D printing is being used. So here's an example in the trauma area, where you have a malunion and you have this drill guide you use to recut what was unioned in a wrong way, and then reposition and put a plate, and then the patient, now before and after, you can see that the hands was much better. Another examples of pelvic fractures. These are like patients who fall from height and have multiple fracture injuries in the pelvis region. And right around this pelvis region are very critical parts of the body, and you can't. It's if you mess up some things, then it's a surgery which is considered very complex. And there are actually now a community of surgeons who are known as pelviacetabular fracture surgeons, right? Who specifically focus just on this, because the amount of care you have to make sure is very important. So in these surgeries, what you do is you do a CT scan. Of course, CT scan and 3D model is by default you have to do, and then from CT scan you align, you do a virtual reduction, you do a virtual surgical planning, and then you create these plates. And depending on what you want to do, you can you can just print these plates and bend your plate before you go into surgery, or you can take the entire model in the surgery. That really depends on the surgeon and how they want to do it. So here's an example, where this is a simple color model they wanted, and they wanted to have this to explain it to the surgeon. Okay, explain to the patient what kind of deformity they had and what kind of fracture they had, as well as also bend the plate beforehand in their office. This is I think a CJP which we printed on color. So you bend it in the office, and then you are not taking this in the surgery. You're just taking that plate that was bended in the surgery, sterilizing it, and using it in the surgery. So those are other applications where you use 3D printing. Of course, when you look at arthroplasty, these are large volume cases. But if you look at knee replacement, the femur axis guide helps reduce the number of holes you need to put in the femur, right? And it reduces the number of surgical steps. It increases the speed of the surgery. So this is where it uses. Hip replacement is another important thing where we found that the cup positioning is very difficult, because what you see here in the image and what you see in the surgery is two different things, right? When the surgeon is looking onto the anatomy in the surgery, you really don't see much, and that's where positioning a cup becomes very important. In cup dislocation is one of the top reasons where orthopedic surgeons, especially hip surgeons who are doing surgery and placing the cup, are always worried about that. What if the patient dislocates, right? It's a worry they have, and if it dislocates, it's generally because of the cup being in placed not properly. And a lot of times, when you have a deformity and an anatomy is all messed up, you can't blame them. They can't really understand where exactly to put the exact anatomy, and that's where preoperative planning, putting the cup, uh, giving the right size of the cup also helps, because then if you give a right size, especially the newer implant designs are all press fit implants with a 3D printed osseointegration. And when you have something like that, you want that the coverage area is as high as possible, but you also don't want to over ream it, right? So those are the areas where if the surgeon had a right size of the implant, then it will help us kind of help them put the right implant for that patient. Okay, here are some examples of cases we have done. So you can see how it's funny how initially some of the newer surgeons, they are very shocked with the fact that, oh, the model is so accurate, it exactly matched the patient. Yeah, because it came from the CT scan. But that is the level of confidence they have today. Some of them, that they don't know if the model will be accurate. And so I think it takes time to build that confidence. But I think once the confidence is built, it becomes kind of a norm for them to kind of use it. Another example is reverse shoulder arthroplasty, for shoulder replacements, where positioning the spin becomes very critical. There is really it's like finding exact center of a circle, and it's not that easy virtual in during the surgery. So using such guides kind of help position and drill exactly where they need to, so that the final implant has a proper anchoring on the chunky part of the bone. And clearly there is a literature showing that if you use something like this, then you have a less risk of revision. So in other words, you are able to put the implant at a more accurate location. Here's an example of a SLA model being compared along with the actual. This is an actual case we did. Okay, and then of course 3D printing, metal 3D printing. I think there's enough information out. A lot of people already know about it, so I'm not going to talk much about that. But it is the gold standard in terms of today. If you look, titanium osseointegrated implants are considered as a gold standard, because look at the picture on the left hand side here, right? This is 4 week and then 12 weeks. So basically in 3 months the bone has integrated all the way inside, and kind of became part of it. So if you think about it, right, now this implant is actually part of that individual, right? A part of the bone. You just cannot remove it anymore, right? So it becomes part of the patient, which is a great news. But also there are disadvantages. If you have to do a revision, it becomes even more challenging. But again, this kind of gives a flavor of the 3D printing for metal. With that, I want to conclude that 3D printing technology is definitely a de facto standard, more for complex surgeries, and especially options for anatomical models, surgical guides, and implants when the anatomy is so different, is where the 3D printing will lead the way. With that, I want to thank you, and yeah, feel free to reach out to me with.
Thank you, Ketan. I think that gives us great insight into the world of orthopedics and how a 3D printing company should look at orthopedics as a field as well.